So what do these numbers and the related historical data say about Canadian real estate?
I think the general thought process is that we obviously are in a very vibrant market on a national level. Yes, there are some areas that are flatter, such as the Maritimes, and some of the Prairie provinces. But generally speaking, the big markets of British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec are very vibrant.
Let's start with BC. We've been a very active couple of years in the BC market, but we're also looking at the 20-year span. What has that said about the steady growth we've seen here?
Well, I think a lot of the market has been fueled by outside investment in Vancouver from different parts of Asian countries. Obviously, that's bode well for investment in Vancouver. It's not so good for locals because it's driven the price to a point where a lot of the locals cannot afford to buy, especially in areas like Vancouver, West Side, West Vancouver, North Vancouver. However, certainly we've become a world-class city in Vancouver, and that's been the attraction from around the globe.
Heading east to Alberta, Edmonton and Calgary are both sort of neck and neck, and they've seen significant growth in the last 20 years.
Yeah, certainly in the last 20 years, when you look at the overall span, they've had significant growth in that marketplace. They had the ups and downs, being the oil-based capital that Calgary is and Alberta is. They've had the ups and downs, and the last couple of years have been a little bit strenuous for some of the markets. But generally speaking, they're on a upward bound right now, and that looks like it should continue.
Moving to the Prairies, Regina, Saskatoon, and Winnipeg. All of those have looked to just have seen steady, consistent growth over the last 20 years. Nothing remarkable, but just steady.
We can count on those two Prairie provinces always to be steady. They have very constant markets, good investment on the long term. They operate completely different than the Torontos or the Vancouvers of the world. But you're correct. Upward growth on a steady basis, and we foresee that to continue in those two provinces.
Great. Now, what about Ontario? You've referred to Toronto as being a really big market, and the GTA in general. But we also looked at some other markets in Ontario as well.
Yeah, Ontario overall, obviously the GTA, the Greater Toronto Marketplace, is the driving force of economics in our country, really, not just in Ontario. So certainly it's a factor all by itself. But outside of the GTA, Ottawa marketplace has been constant, and of course attracting a lot of the tech industry into that marketplace. Markets like Windsor have been affected obviously by the automobile industry, so they've had their ups and downs, but again, a reasonable place to buy real estate on a long-term basis. Northern Ontario into North Bay or into Thunder Bay have always been great communities to buy real estate in. Again, you're not going to see the bounces that we get in some big markets, but obviously they're going to continue to grow.
Montreal. Specifically, we looked at downtown and southwest Montreal in this particular study, but even comparing it to 20 years ago, they've seen significant growth too.
They have. Montreal's, again, a world-class city, especially downtown. They've had a lot of growth in the condo market down in the downtown core of Montreal of recent. That market is kind of what we refer to as a sleeper market. In a lot of cases, it's probably right now, from an investment point of view, probably one of the best markets in Canada to invest in real estate. There's more constant areas outside of Montreal, of course, in Laval. Some of the suburbs of Montreal are seeing the benefit of that as well.
Finally, Atlantic Canada, which is sort of the slowest, flattest market across the country. What can you say about why that's happened?
Well, I think the Atlantic Canadian marketplace, all four provinces actually, have been reasonably consistent up until about 10 years ago. And they've been very similar to the Prairies that we mentioned about Manitoba and Saskatchewan, in the fact that there was steady growth. Economics of the maritime provinces right now, because of the lower population base, not as much industry going in there. The disappointment with the shipbuilding contracts that didn't come through the way that Halifax Dartmouth thought it was going to come through. That's had a tremendous impact on that area, and it slowed the growth. And now the most recent announcement that the pipeline is not going to be built from Alberta through to St. John, New Brunswick, is another bit of a downer for them in that particular marketplace. However, bottom line is real estate still continues to grow. So if we look back 20 years ago, it's still a good investment. It just takes longer to build your equity.
Great, that's all we need.